I didn't expect to see this many people attending a workshop on moral judgment development, but I'm sure that there are some carrots and some rewards that have been extended in order to give you an incentive to be here. But I'm glad to see you. How many of you, just out of curiosity, how many of you have heard of Kohlberg's system of moral judgment development before? Okay? And out of those of you that raised your hands, how many of you were exposed to that system in a psychology class or a philosophy class? Okay. All right, good. Well, Kohlberg did the majority of his research back in the 50s and the 60s. He was researching college males primarily on college campuses, mostly because in the 50s that was what we had on college campuses, mostly college males. And he was curious about why people make the decisions morally that they make. He wasn't as curious about why they did it, but he wanted to know what was the reasoning underlying their decision. So one of the dilemmas that he always presented, it's his capstone dilemma. I mean, when you think of Kohlberg, you think of Hines and the drug dilemma. And we're going to look at that in just a minute. But before, I want to explain these stages here and make sure that we have a good grasp of the stages, and then we can apply them to Hines and the drug dilemma. The first two stages are called the pre-conventional level of moral judgment development. Now, how many of you have heard of Piaget? Okay. So Piaget had what we call the pre-operational stage of cognitive development. A pre-operational stage is about 3 to 5 years of age. Kids are very egocentric. They're not able to do certain things, like they're not able to center. They focus on appearance. They're centrated. They see one aspect of something and they exclude the other aspects. They can't reverse operations. So they have some limitations because of their egocentrism. So we would say that kids between the ages of 3 and 5 are in the pre-conventional stage of moral judgment development. And let me give you an example. Let's just take stage 1, the punishment orientation. This is what Kohlberg originally called punishment versus obedience. The reason I do something right is because if I don't do it, I'm going to be punished. So I'm going to obey what mom and dad asked me to do. Otherwise, there's going to be some consequence, and the consequence I will not like. So that's the reason we do the right thing. Now, some of you are like me. Sometimes we operate at stage 1, level 1. There's a light near my house. It's a 4-way light, and at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's red one way and green another. Well, the way that I'm going is red. And periodically, I'm in a hurry at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I look around to see if there are any other cars, and there aren't. And there aren't any police officers, and there aren't, and I sneak through that light. Now, I know none of you have ever done anything like that, okay? But the reason I sneak through that light is because I know I'm not going to get punished. There's no police officers, there's no other cars, I'm not going to hurt anybody, so I gradually, slowly sneak through that light. I've only done it once in the last day or two. Stage 2. Stage 2 is basically you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. It's a pleasure-seeking orientation. Kohlberg originally called it naive, I want you to listen to this, naive instrumental hedonism. Doesn't that sound like fun? Naive instrumental hedonism, because you're going to do something for me and I'm going to do something for you. So a little girl that's 5 or 6 years of age, or a little boy may say to Mom, Mom, I'll take out the trash if you give me 50 cents. Okay, well, we're operating at stage 2. Now, again, some of us who are adults may operate there every once in a while. We may do something for something. As a matter of fact, I'll bet you're here today in this particular workshop because you're getting a reward. There's some kind of reward attached to your presence here, so it is something for something. When we move into stages 3 and 4, the conventional stage, this is what Kohlberg would parallel with Piaget, called concrete operational thinking. Children are now logical. They have decentered in terms of their ego, and they can entertain things from other people's perspectives. Concrete. So stage 3, we could see a 7-year-old boy or girl being the teacher's pet because they want to be a good student. So every time the teacher needs somebody to carry something or do something, they volunteer to take messages to the office or to take something, the roll to the office, or whatever they need to do. They volunteer to do that. They're trying to be a good girl or a good boy. And at stage 4, we move into the authority orientation. The community has established a set of laws that we're going to abide by, and we agree that we're going to live by these laws. That's the community orientation. Stages 3 and 4 again for Piaget and Kohlberg would be, say, 6 to 11, somewhere in there. Okay? Now, the post-conventional stage here is where we get a little dicey. When you go to stage 5, the social contract, this is usually 12, 13 years of age and up into adulthood. Social contract says that we support the laws and the rules, but it's based on rational analysis and mutual agreement. And rules are recognized as open to question, but are upheld for the good of the community and in the name of democratic values. Now, I want you to notice something here. It says that rules are recognized as what? Open to question. So at stage 5, we start questioning things. And that makes sense. If you've got a teenager, you understand that. If you were a teenager very recently, you understand that. You started questioning the rules that mom and dad had, the curfews that mom and dad had. You started questioning the consequences that they were meting out for certain offenses. This stage here is where we would find somebody like Rosa Parks, who says, you know, I don't think I'm going to get up and give my seat up today. I know what the municipal law says. It says when a white person gets on the bus, I've got to get up and give my seat to him, and I've got to go somewhere else. But I don't think today I'm going to get up and give you my seat. So she questions that law. This is where also somebody like John Q. Remember John Q? His son needs a heart transplant. He goes in with an empty gun, no bullets in the revolver, and he takes some people hostage, mainly the doctor that can do the heart transplant. He doesn't harm anybody, but he wants his son to have a heart transplant. Now, the social contract, what is the social contract that our government has with us? It's in the preamble. I think it's in the preamble to the Constitution. The right to what? Life? Is it the preamble?
Liberty.
Liberty? Pursuit of happiness. So, how could John Q. justify going in and taking a doctor hostage that could do the heart transplant for his son? How could he justify that? Because why? The pursuit of life. He doesn't have insurance, he doesn't have a job, he doesn't have access to money, he sells everything he has, but he says that my son should have a right to this heart transplant. So this is why it gets a little bit dicey here. Now, when you get to stage 5, here's the thing to remember. If you do decide to break the law, you need to raise your hand and admit to it and suffer the consequences. So somebody like Socrates says, you're right, I've been corrupting the minds of the youth by asking them questions and asking the thing on a deeper level. Does that sound like your professors that may be in here? They ask you questions and ask you to think on a deeper level. And he says, I will go to jail and take my punishment. His best friend goes to him and says, hey, I can bust you out of here. What does Socrates say? Oh, no. I want to stay because I need to suffer my consequence, and I will drink the hemlock. Okay? So stage 5, raise your hand, admit to it, and suffer the consequence. Stage 6, the morality of individual principles, is where you have a principle that you have lived your life by, and you are willing to follow it even if it means going against the law, and maybe even if it means sacrificing your life. Keep in mind that one of our most famous orators in the history of the United States from the Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King, said, what? A life that's not worth dying for, if you don't have something worth dying for, you're not fit to live. Do you remember that quote? Anybody remember that quote? If you don't have something worth dying for, you're not fit to live. So here we're in an individual principle stage. Now, before we analyze Hines and the drug dilemma using this, I want to ask you a couple of questions. One question I'd like to ask you is this. Kohlberg did the majority of his research on males. So there's a woman named Carol Gilligan at Harvard University of Education. She wrote a book called In a Different Voice. She said that men are more likely to operate on a morality of justice, but women are more likely to operate on a morality of caring. Would you agree with that?
No.
Okay. She also said that in Kohlberg's test, that women came out looking inferior to men. Men always scored higher, up at the 5 or the 6, and women were down here at 3 or 4. So she said that women appear to be inferior to men based upon this test, but if we had a test that was based on a morality of caring, we might get a different response. Actually, she gave an example. She gave a dilemma, a moral dilemma to a group of 11-year-old boys and girls. There was a mole, a group of moles, that were living inside a tent during the wintertime. And a porcupine asked if it could come into the tent. And they said, sure. But the porcupine began to prick the other moles. And the question asked to the boys is, how do we resolve this issue? And the boy says, hey, we were here first. Got to go. They asked the girls, how would you resolve this issue? You know what the girls said? Many of them said we could throw a blanket over the porcupine and he wouldn't bother anybody. Okay? There is a difference, isn't there? Now, if you come from a collectivistic culture where the family or the group is number one and individual principles are secondary, what's the highest that you think somebody might score if they're from a collectivistic culture in this? I mean, if they're taking a moral dilemma test, what's the highest that you think they would score?
Stage 4.
Stage 4. That's exactly right. Because collectivistic cultures are not going to go against the law and the rules and the society. Okay? So, let's look at Hines and the drug dilemma. I just gave you that dilemma, passed it out. So, his wife is dying of a terminal illness.
Hey, Bill.
Uh-huh.
We ran out. Can you put it on the projector or the overhead? We ran out.
Yeah, can you, if you got a card, can I borrow you? Thank you.
Everybody got it? Okay.
Has everybody got it? No. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So his wife is dying of a terminal illness. There's a drug that's been invented. Now, I know $2,000 doesn't sound like much, but you've got to remember when Kohlberg did this first dilemma, it was back in the 50s. So $2,000 back then was quite a bit of money. Today we might say it's $200,000, $40,000. People that have cystic fibrosis, they spend $40,000 a month on their medication. So let's say it's $40,000. So he goes to the druggist or the pharmacist that created it, and he says, listen, all I can come up with is maybe $200. Actually, he paid $200 for the radium and he charged $2,000 for a small dose of the drug. Sick woman's husband Hines went to everyone he knew to borrow the money, but he could only get together about $1,000, which is half of what it cost. He told the druggist that his wife was dying and asked to sell it cheaper or let him pay later. But the druggist said, no, I discovered the drug and I'm going to make my money from it. So Hines got desperate and began to think about breaking into the man's store to steal the drug for his wife. Now here's the question for you. Should he steal it? You can't decide, or he shouldn't steal it. So check off one of those. Just check one. Then after you check it, here's what I want you to do. Look at the statements. These statements below are what we call defining issues statements. There are 12 statements. Look at those 12 statements and ask yourself how much importance each one of those statements has in your decision. So you've got a paper that I handed out that has how you would operationally define great, much, some, little, or no. But you can pretty well figure that out. So if you go to statement number 1, whether a community's laws are going to be upheld, did that principle or that statement influence your decision in whether you should steal the drug or not steal the drug, or you can't decide? Okay. Right? Steal it, says Sam. All right. Number 2. Isn't it only natural for a loving husband to care so much for his wife that he'd steal? So go ahead and put a check in there. Great, much, some, little, or no. Number 3, is Hines willing to risk getting shot as a burglar or going to jail for the chance of stealing the drug might help? Okay, so go all the way through those and check what's of most importance to you. And then after you do that, look down at the bottom and find the one that you would say is most important, the second most important, the third most important, the fourth most important. Okay, you guys don't have a sheet, do you? Okay. Oh, we got some extras? Thank you, Sam. Bob, did you get one? Okay. Okay, so what you're asking yourself is, how important is this statement in my decision as to whether he should steal it or not steal it? We need some more sheets. Okay. Pass those up. Okay, anybody else? I've got some extras. Okay, thank you, Bob. Thank you. All right. Okay, number 7. Okay. There are statements that Kohlberg put in these issue statements that were nonsense statements, and number 7 is a nonsense statement. But what he was doing was checking to see if people were paying attention to what they were reading. So I shouldn't have told you that, but since you asked, 7 is a nonsense statement, so you can disregard it. I mean, you could, but you don't have to. Yeah, because in the end, I'm going to tell you that it's a nonsense statement. Okay, is everybody done? Just about?
I haven't even read them yet.
Okay. All right, well, let's take number 1. Let's look at number 1, and let's evaluate number 1 from this scale here, okay? So, if I did steal it or I didn't steal it or I can't decide, again, that's not what's important to Kohlberg. He wants to know your reason. So, if number 1, whether a community's laws are going to be upheld, if that was very important to you in making that decision, what stage would that be up here? That'd be stage 4, wouldn't it? The community has a set of laws that we're going to agree to abide by, okay? So if Kohlberg is evaluating this, he's going to note out to the side that's stage 4. So and if you put great importance, then he's going to note you gave great importance to stage 4, the laws of the community. Let's go to number 2. Isn't it only natural for a loving husband to care so much for his wife that he'd steal? What stage would that be? 3. Why? Because that's what? A good husband, a loving husband wouldn't let his wife die if you said he should steal it. Okay? So that would be a role orientation. That'd be number 3. Now, number 3, the statement number 3, is Hines willing to risk getting shot as a burglar or going to jail for the chances that stealing the drug might help? What stage would that be? Okay, yeah, going to jail, 1, and it could be 2. Is he willing to trade something for something? Right? So it could be 2 as well. If I'm willing to go to jail in order to steal the drug to help my wife, okay, I'm willing to suffer the consequence. That's 2 for 2. Something for something. So 1 or 2. What about number 4? Whether Hines is a professional wrestler or has considerable influence with professional wrestlers. That's a what? That's a nonsense issue, isn't it? That's one of those that Hines put, or Kohlberg put in just to see if people were paying attention. Okay, what about number 5? Huh? I'm sorry?
I thought it was like, well, if you're a burglar, you have a better chance of like getting through it if you're a professional wrestler.
Okay, well, you know what? You could rationalize your answer. That would be a rational approach, but from Kohlberg's perspective, no. But you could rationalize that. Okay, what about number 5? Whether Hines is stealing for himself or doing this solely to help someone else. What would that be? 3. Yeah, that'd be stage 3, wouldn't it? Am I doing this to help someone else? Am I fulfilling the role of being a good helper? I'm helping someone. All right, now, number 6. Whether the druggist's rights to his invention have to be respected. What would that be? 4. Right, because the law says if he invented it, he has a patent on it, it's his. And he has a right to make the money. That's what our law says. What about number 7? We've already said number 7, whether the essence of living is more encompassing than the termination of dying socially and individually. Well, again, that was a nonsense statement that Kohlberg put in just to make sure people were paying attention. If you got, let's say that when you were taking this test, if you had 2 nonsense statements that you marked of great importance, then Kohlberg would throw the results out. He'd say they're invalid. Okay? All right, what about number 8? What values are going to be the basis for governing how people act towards each other? What would that be? Well, see, it sounds like 4, doesn't it? But we're calling 4 into question, aren't we? We're calling the values, the laws, which are representative of the values, so we're calling those into question, so it'd be a higher level. Where would you put it? 5 or 6. Because we're asking, what are the principles that are going to inform the laws? So we're saying, What values, what principles are going to inform the laws? Okay, now look at number 9. Whether the druggist is going to be allowed to hide behind a worthless law which only protects the rich anyhow. What is that? Yeah, we could say that's 4, because the laws protect people that have invented things. Now, their attitude here is that this person is rich. We don't know if this person is rich. We don't know. They could be a hard-working pharmacist or druggist that worked for 20 or 30 years to invent this drug. So if you took the sweat equity that they have invested, maybe they're only making $5 an hour for all those 30 years that they spent when you look at what they're charging for the drug. Okay, number 10, whether the law in this case is getting in the way of the most basic claim of any member of society. What's the most basic claim of the members of our society when we talked about the preamble to the Constitution? The right to life. So that would be stage 5. Stage 5 would be our social contract, which is our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that our government has with us, okay, through the preamble to the Constitution. Now, what about number 11? Whether the druggist deserves to be robbed for being so greedy and cruel. That's not nonsense, no.
Wouldn't that be 3?
That's 3.
So, like, bad?
Right. He's a bad person. He deserves what he's getting, right? Bad people, greedy people, cruel people. You know, we always say what goes around comes around, so that would be stage 3. He's a greedy, cruel person. He deserves what he's getting. Role orientation. What about number 12? Would stealing in such a case bring about more total good for the whole society or not? Well, what are we asking? We're questioning, aren't we? We're questioning. So that'd be stage 5. This particular rule that we have about not stealing, we're questioning the value of it. Okay? Now, let's say that number 12 was level 5, number 10 was level 5, number 8 was level 6, and let's say number 1 was level 4. Let's say that those 4 were your most important ones. Kohlberg would say you have a very high level of moral judgment. A very high level of moral judgment. But would you always manifest or demonstrate that level, that high level of moral judgment? Not necessarily. So what would be one of the factors that would influence you to manifest that? So you have this high level of moral judgment. You're a very principled person. You're willing to die for what you believe in. So at the University of North Texas, we planted a student in a wheelchair outside a big classroom at North Texas. Had about 600 students in there, freshmen. And they had taken the moral judgment development test. And we wanted to see who was going to stop, because this student had books and was trying to balance things and needed help. It was a plan. We wanted to see who's going to stop and help this student. Door open, class ended, they're just all going out. 3 people stopped to help the student. So we already had given them the moral judgment development test, so we got their names and went back and looked. Where do you think they had scored in terms of the moral judgment development? 2 female and 1 male. Where do you think they had scored?
High level morality.
No. They scored at 3 and 4. Majority of their responses were at stages 3 and 4, which is the role orientation and the laws of the community. The ones that had scored at 5 and 6, they were gone. So what Kohlberg started asking, the other question he started asking was, what determines whether or not somebody's going to follow through on this? And it was a very simple answer. It's called ego strength. Ego strength. The ability to do and live out what you believe. Ego strength. The ability to do and live out what you believe. So your ego strength is strong enough that you're going to embrace that. Now, if Hines had chosen to steal the drug, what would be a stage 6 response? A principled response for stealing the drug? Well, he'd have to go to jail. Okay, stage 5 would say, I'm going to steal the drug because my wife has a right to life. So the government has not fulfilled its contract with my wife. My wife has a right to life. I'm going to steal the drug so she can live. I'll go to jail. But what would be a stage 6? A universal ethical principle that everybody, regardless of the culture you come from, you would agree with. Huh? The right to life, what? The right to life takes precedence over the monetary gain, the right to make money. The right to life takes precedence over the right to make money. Now, do you see any conflicts between true capitalism and a democratic society? There might be a conflict there. Okay? Might be. Okay? All right, here's another dilemma. I've got another one for you. And then we'll get to the most recent dilemma. 3, 4. I'm going to ask you guys to share. There's 6 of you, so let's take 2, 4, 6. Take 3, and you guys share one. Okay? You guys share, if you will. Okay? Bob.
I'll share with Mike.
Share with Mike. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, here's 3. 2, 3. If you guys will share. Okay. And if you guys will share, 2, 3 of you might have to share, Jackie and Amanda. You guys want to share? Okay. Yeah, Sam. Thank you. Okay, and then we'll get some more copies here. And up until then, if you guys can share, and then maybe you guys could share. Y'all got one that you could share, okay? And you guys could share, okay? And you guys can share, okay, until we get more copies. And then 1, 2, 3 here, Tanya, okay? And there's about 3, 4 here for you guys if you guys want to share that, okay? Pass that down, thank you. And then Marianne, will you distribute those back there? Thank you. Yeah, let me put it up. If I saved a copy, I think I did. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Bob, do you use document cameras? Yeah, Sam? Okay, right here? Okay. Okay, thank you. Put that up. Okay. Yeah. All right. So this is a more recent dilemma. Would somebody volunteer to read that for me? Out loud? Would somebody volunteer? Okay, thank you.
Fred, a senior in high school, wanted to publish a newspaper for students so that he could express many of his opinions. He wanted to speak out against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and had to speak out against some of the school's rules, like the rule forbidding boys to wear saggy pants. When Fred started his newspaper, he asked his principal for permission. The principal said it would be all right if before every publication Fred would turn in all his articles for the principal's approval. Fred agreed and turned in several articles for approval. The principal approved all of them, and Fred published 2 issues of the paper in the next 2 weeks. But the principal had not expected that Fred's newspaper would receive so much attention. Students were so excited by the paper that they began to organize protests against the saggy pants regulation and other school rules. Angry parents objected to Fred's opinions. They phoned the principal and sent emails telling him that the newspaper was unpatriotic and should not be published. As a result of the rising excitement, the principal ordered Fred to stop publishing. He gave as a reason that Fred's activities were disruptive to the operation of the school. Should the principal stop the newspaper?
Okay. So, check off. Should stop it, should not stop it, or you can't decide. And then we're going to look at a couple of issues, and then we'll discuss it. Okay, so look at your statements. If you have your statements, look at your statements and decide. Let's take the first statement. We'll go through this since everybody doesn't have a copy. Statement number 1, is the principal more responsible to students or to the parents? What stage do you think that would be in Kohlberg's system? 4. That would be stage 4. That's correct. Stage 4. Okay? What about the next one? Did the principal give his word that the newspaper could be published for a long time, or did he just promise to approve the newspaper 1 issue at a time? What is your word? Your word is like a binding contract in a way, isn't it? So what stage would that be? 5? Okay. What about number 3? Would the students start protesting even more if the principal stopped the newspaper? I'm at a pre-conventional level here. Would the students start protesting even more if the principal stopped the newspaper? What am I worried about here now? I'm worried about what? Yeah, I'm worried about punishment. Maybe it's going to be a punishing thing for me if I stop the newspaper and I'm the principal. So it'd be a punishment versus obedience thing. What about number 4? When the welfare of the school is threatened, does the principal have the right to give orders to students? What would that be? What stage would that be? Does the principal have the right to give orders to students? Yeah, stage 4. That would be the law and order orientation. Number 5, does the principal have the freedom of speech to say no in this case? Now, you're not going to believe this, and we won't like this, but Kohlberg thought this was a nonsense issue. This was a nonsense statement. Does the principal have the freedom of speech? Why would this really be a nonsense statement? Because the principal has the power, stage 4, as agreed upon, so this would be a non-issue, a nonsense statement for Kohlberg. What about number 6? If the principal stopped the newspaper, would he be preventing full discussion of important problems? Where would that go? Yeah. Tristan, why would you put that at stage 5?
Because, like you said, ties about social contract rules and questioning them.
That's right. They're open to question and we can have a disagreement. What did St. Augustine say? What did St. Augustine or St. Augustine say? An unjust law is no law at all. Remember that? An unjust law is no law at all. So this law may be unjust and therefore it's open to discussion. Okay? What about number 7? Whether the principal's order would make Fred lose faith in the principal. Well, that is an issue. But that's in the conventional level. Where would you put that in the conventional levels? 3 or 4? 3. Why? Because a good principal would do certain things, and if I lose faith in the principal, then they're a bad principal. So that would be a role orientation. Look at number 8. Whether Fred was really loyal to his school and patriotic to his country. Where would that be? No? I mean, it sounds like it because we've had people try to use that on us before that we shouldn't question because we're unpatriotic if we question, right? But 3, because a good citizen or a good student it would be a role orientation. Okay, number 9. What effect would stopping the paper have on the student's education, in critical thinking and judgments? What effect would stopping the paper have on the student's education in critical thinking and judgments? Where would you put that? 5. Yeah, why? Again, because of the dialogue, the discourse. Okay, it would deter the discourse, and that would be stage 5. What about number 11? Whether the principal should be influenced by some angry parents when it is the principal that knows best what is going on in the school. Whether the principal would be influenced by some angry parents when it is the principal that knows best what is going on in the school. Yeah, that's a role. And his role or her role is to know what's going on in all sectors of the school. But it also could be stage 4 with that we have certain rules and regulations and we're not abiding by them, then as the principal they know. All right, what about the last one, 12? Whether Fred was using the newspaper to stir up hatred and discontent. What would that be? If I'm using my newspaper to stir up hatred and discontent. Well, give me I would need a principle that I'm abiding by on 6 or 5. I'd need some principle or rule or law that's called into question on 5. Well, somebody said 3. Why would it be 3? A good student or a good editor or a good publisher wouldn't use something to stir up discord and hatred. Right? Right? Okay. Now, I'm sorry, I skipped number 10. Okay. Whether Fred was in any way violating the rights of others in publishing his own opinions. What would that be? Is he violating others' rights by publishing his own opinions? Oh, yeah, he's questioning, so that would be stage 5. Good. Now see, it's not that difficult to figure out these stages, is it? Okay. Now, Kohlberg committed suicide in 1987. I was living in Chicago in 1986 and 87, and Kohlberg committed suicide. And we to this day, we don't know why. There was no suicide note or anything. But his stages continue to be used. Now, I've got one last dilemma here. Sam, did we get any of these made? Any of these? Can you give me some of these? Thank you. Just that one side there. Just one side. Okay. I got to thank Professor Little for his assistance with this, because he's the one that showed me the article, and then we decided we would use it. So we can share up until we get some others out. So I'm just going to pass these down, and you guys just get one to share with until the others get here. Okay. This is a more recent case. And it's been in the news, and it continues to be in the news. And I am not as up to date on everything as maybe I should be, but this article is a great dilemma. And this is the Ed Snowden case. One side says he's a hero, and the other side says he's a traitor. Now, help me out here. What was the amendment? What's the amendment that he felt like was being violated by the right to privacy? Right to privacy. So we're listening in on everybody's conversations if we want to. We don't need to go to a judge and get a warrant to do that, or be justified to do it. We can listen in on people's conversations. We can look at what else, Benedict?
Record all emails transmitted in the United States.
Okay, record all emails transmitted in the United States. Okay, so Snowden decides that that's not right. And so he blows the whistle. Okay? Now, one day I was counting money up at the church. Every once in a while I count money up at the church, and when I count money I throw it up in the air, and what stays up is God's and what comes down is mine. But I was counting money at the church, okay? And I asked the group of men that I was counting with, all of them were 50 and up. Snowden, hero or traitor? Every single one of them said he was a traitor. And they talked about the Patriot Act after 9/11, and that we agreed in order to stay safe we're going to have to give up some of our rights. So, if Kohlberg's system was used to analyze Snowden here, and Snowden says, the reason that I blew the whistle, what do you think his reasoning would be if it were a stage 5 or a stage 6 level of reasoning? What would Snowden's reasoning likely be? Huh?
The government broke their contract.
The government, and what was the government's contract?
Give me privacy.
Right to privacy. Okay, now, what if somebody said, there's one guy that says that he thinks that Snowden is a very selfish individual and that just chose to blow this whistle, and that Snowden knew that he had signed a contract when he went to work for the NSA, that this information had to be kept private, but would the fact that Snowden did not know when he went to work for the NSA that they were going to violate this particular right, would that have any influence over his making the decision to blow the whistle? Probably so. Okay? So as you begin to look at, and I'm going to give you this to take home with you and to look at, but as you begin to look at your reasoning in different situations, I want you to think about something. What level are you operating on most of the time? What would you say? Where would you say that most of us live most of the time? We have to go to work, we have to go to school, we have families that we have to get along with, we have to do certain things. Where would you say that most of us live? 4. Stage 4? Stage 3? Huh?
Punishment avoidance.
Punishment versus avoidance.
I don't speed because I don't want to get a ticket.
Yes.
I don't speed around cops because I don't want to get a ticket.
Right. Okay, you don't speed around cops because you don't want to get a ticket. So probably 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, when do you think that we might have a tendency to step out and go to 5 or 6? What would be the situation or the state of affairs that might influence us to operate at a higher level? Family. Yeah. So if we had a loved one that was dying of a terminal illness and we figured out we were going to have to break the law in order to save their life, we could justify that. Family. What else? What other areas do you think we might step out and go to 5 or 6? Yeah, well, for safety or security reasons, we might feel like that we need to break a certain law in order to stay safe. For example, I'm a nurse. I work the 3 to 11 shift. I get off at 11 at night. I'm driving home. I happen on an accident. This person needs first aid. I don't have a first aid kit. There's a Walgreens right here on the corner. It's closed. I break out the window or the door window and I go in and get what I need, come out and render first aid, And when the police come, they say, who did this? And I say, I did. And what are the chances that I'm going to be prosecuted for that? Probably very little, because I was doing it to save someone's life. Okay? Now, Professor Jacobs was telling us yesterday that our systems, such as the family, is being replaced with social media. Social media is what is keeping us connected. Social media is what is informing us of our values. And as I listened to him talk about that, I thought, well, is that really true? Are our values, personally, individually, being determined by social media? Or do we still have our own individual value system that's not influenced by social media? What would you say? How much impact does the social media have on our value system? A lot. Yeah, more and more. So I'm sitting here and I'm in my office. I'm in the B building. And this is 10 years ago, and somebody knocks on the door. And it's one of the workers who works here 10 years ago. So this is all done, it's gone, it's no longer happening. And she says, in Spanish, she says, they are taking me to the bathroom, and they are slapping me around, and they are telling me they will call immigration on me if I don't take on more responsibility for no more pay. This is 10 years ago. So I understand that the company that's in charge is being subcontracted with, right? They're not Brookhaven employees. But we still are subcontracting with a company that is abusing some employees who are cleaning our restrooms and our rooms. So I decide that I don't have any culpability in this. I don't have a dog in this hunt. And I tell her, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. Did I do the right thing? No, I didn't. So what level of moral judgment was I operating on when I made that decision that I didn't have any responsibility or culpability or any involvement in this situation? What level was I at? 1 and 2. Mainly 1. So, but what if I had said, you know what? I think our Director of Human Resources, who's responsible for contracting out with this company, needs to know. And what if I'd gone over and said to the Director of Human Resources, are you aware that this is going on, and I want you to talk to this woman? And our Director of Human Resources had said, you know what, you're right. Even though we're not doing it, we're subcontracting with a company that is doing it, and therefore we need to address this situation. If it's not remediated, then we need to terminate the contract. What level would she be operating at if she had done that? 5. Okay. I have a dilemma that I give in class, and it's the Mr. Webster dilemma. Mr. Flores is the best mechanic he can find, but Mr. Flores is undocumented. And Mr. Webster's customers don't like undocumented Hispanic people. So the question is, when Mr. Webster has Mr. Flores come back to him, he says, can I have the job? And Mr. Webster says, I've already hired somebody. Sorry. But Mr. Webster really hadn't hired anybody. He just didn't want to hire Mr. Flores because he was afraid of what? The response that his customers might give. What level of moral judgment would he be operating on?
3.
On 3 or maybe 1? He's afraid of being punished. Okay? Now, what if Mr. Webster had said, you know what, Homeland Security says you've got to have the proper documentation before I can hire you, or my business is going to suffer a penalty. But I will help you get the proper documentation. Let me work with you to get the proper documentation because you are the best person for the job. What level would he be operating on then?
4.
He'd be, well, you could say 3 and you could say 4, but he'd also be at 5 too, wouldn't he? He'd be at 5. He understands the social contract. He doesn't think that the law is absolutely perfect, so he's willing to get himself out there on the limb with Mr. Flores and help him get the documentation so he can come to work for him. So I go home today and my wife says, you either take out the trash or I'm going to kick your rear end. And I take the trash out. What level am I on?
1.
Level 1. Very good. Okay. All right, now, I want to start terminating. So before I terminate completely, my question for you is this. Do you feel like you have a pretty good grasp of these 6 stages of moral judgment development?
Yes.
Do you think you have a pretty good grasp? Okay. Can you understand why collectivistic cultures don't go above stage 4?
Yeah.
Can you understand that? So when I was living in Saudi Arabia, and there was no trash on the television because the religious social structure and the theocracy says no trash on the television, and they didn't sell alcohol in their stores, and there wasn't even any rock and roll music in the supermarket, the souk, but they abided by those laws and those rules. Everybody did. So could we understand why maybe when I talked to people in Saudi Arabia, I said, don't you want to have modernization and freedom like we do in the United States? Could we understand why they might say, no, we'll stay at stage 4, we like our culture the way it is? Could we understand that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's easy to understand, isn't it? If you stay at stage 4, you don't have as much chaos. But now, here's my question for you. If we had stayed at stage 4, would we have had the civil rights movement? No. No. And now do we have another group today that is also asking for equal rights? Yeah, we do. We have other groups today that are asking for equal rights. Okay? So take this with you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your attention. And thank you, Dr. Link, Andrew, Beverly, Professor Little, Professor Garza, Professor Urota. Thank y'all for your support today. And Dean Govea.